In this video, we're going to be talking about using Fluent and Sqlite. Let's first go to the package.swift file. When we generated our project using the Vapor toolbox, we got some things included with it. We got Vapor, and we also got Fluent Sqlite. Fluent Sqlite and Vapor were also added as dependencies to app. Fluent is an ORM. This means an object relational mapper. It's a piece of code that's going to allow us to interact with our database using only Swift. Sqlite is a type of database. Typically, Sqlite databases use SQL, so SQL. Basically, it's a structured query language that allows us to interact with our databases. There are a ton of these other than Sqlite. There's things such as Postgres, which is one of its close, we could almost call it a close cousin. It's unrelated, but it follows the same kind of pattern, shares a lot of the same database types. We can also think of MySQL, which is also a really common one. In this case, we're going to be using Sqlite. Comes packaged with Vapor, works kind of out of the box. The first place we need to go is to our post.swift. Now remember, we had already created this. It has a content and it has an author. Our next step here is to give it an ID. Whenever you have a record inside of a database, they always have an ID. The ID is a primary key or a distinct key that only this record will have. In this case, we're going to make it an integer. Our next step after this is we need to make our post conform to several other protocols. So let's grab our post and let's have it first conform to the Sqlite model. Now, out of the box, this is not going to work because it does not know about Sqlite model. So what we have to do, go to the top and import Fluent Sqlite. Once we've done this, we can go ahead and write an extension for migration. We're going to talk about what migrations are in more detail in a few moments. But the best way to think about it is that a migration defines how this file, how Fluent, may change our database. Let's just keep that in mind for now. Let's now go to our configure.swift file. Now, by default, it came with Fluent Sqlite, and it also came with line 14. Now, we've looked at services before with our Leaf provider, but let's dive into it for a second. Whenever we get a provider from some external library, we need to add it to Vapor. That can be done by registering it with services. This is a procedure you're going to use to add external functionality to your Vapor project by registering new services. Now notice once again, services registering router, services registering middlewares, which we won't talk about too much right now, and also look at services being registered for our databases and migrations. Now immediately notice that we use the database config and we set up our database. We add a database, a Sqlite database. First, realize it's stored in memory, which we're going to change in a moment, and notice .sqlite. The reason .sqlite is used here is because we potentially might use this and change this to maybe a Postgres database or some other type of database. Now, what we want to do now is we want to first get access to our directory. So I'm going to call this directory config, and I'm going to grab access to directory config, and I'm going to call it detect. As it said, it's going to create a config to our default working directory. Basically, that's going to give me access to this directory right here. Our next step is to just add this as a service. So let's immediately add it, our directory config, and we have it added. So now we can use our directory configuration. Our next step here is we want to change this storage here. Now we're going to use file and we're going to provide it with a new path. Path is just going to be a string representation of where it's going to be located in our project. So we're going to just interpolate. We need some string interpolation here. We're going to grab directory config. We're going to grab working directory. So this is our working directory right in here. And we're going to write microposter.db. So what this is going to do is add a database called microposter.db and add this Sqlite database. Now, what's cool about this is that when we run this, if it already exists, it's not going to create a new one. Then, let's move forward to looking at the migrations. We see a migration config, and then we see migrations add model to do.self. Let's take this out. Oh, that's right, host.self. And we're going to run. Migrations effectively are used to change the structure of our database. If a migration has already been run, it won't be run again. And basically it's looking to see, do you need me to change the database in some way? In this case, we're telling it, yes, we need to migrate it. It needs to then let us know it's complete because post.swift does not exist in our database yet. So now the question should be, how do I check this and make sure that my database is all connected? The way for us to check and be sure that that actually worked is to get something called Sqlite browser. So we're going to get this DB browser for Sqlite. I'm just going to show you how to search for it. Just look for Sqlite browser in Google, and it's going to be the first option. So once we get there, download this file and go ahead and install it. Once it's downloaded and installed, let's go ahead and open it. I already have it, so I'm just going to grab it from my machine. So this program is going to allow us to very, very easily take a look inside of our database. Let's go back to terminal and let's just open our folder. And notice we have a microposter.db file. Let's go ahead and just drag this in. And immediately what we'll notice is that we see posts that have content, author. We'll also see Fluent. This is going to manage our migrations and just manage as our tables change. This is where we want to focus. Now that we see this, we know that everything has worked and we've connected Sqlite to our Vapor project.